Hi guys, Lord willing, this will be the last recording that I'm doing for this class for a very long time. Let's get right into it. Presidential elections. The general election, meaning not the primaries, but the actual election, occurs the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. Why so complicated? I probably just didn't want it on the first day of November. Sometimes the first day is a Tuesday. They want it the second week of November. So, I don't know. That's what they decided. Much of your presidential campaign strategy is going to hinge on the electoral college system, not getting the most votes in the popular vote, but in the electoral college. So they're not looking at what cities have the most people that I want to vote for me. They're looking at what states have the most electoral votes who will vote for me. Which ones do I need to win? You might be able to ignore some states that are diehard for you. Though, of course, you want to keep them diehard for you. You might want to go to these swing states that you're not sure which way they're going to go. The Electoral College definitely does affect your campaign strategy. As you see here, you need 270 votes to win, and this map is a prediction of the 2016 election. You can see there's some diehard states, dark red and dark blue, and then there's medium red and medium blue, and then there's some that people just have no idea which way it's going to go. And neither side is guaranteed. Looks like it was a very close election. In 1960, Nixon visited each one of all the 50 states in his campaign trail, and he did very well in the popular vote. He's in the red here. He won almost as many votes, like it was neck and neck with JFK. But that's a bad strategy. He wasted a lot of time on little states that he should have spent in big states. And as you see in this top pie chart here, JFK did win the electoral vote by quite a lot. The popular vote so close, the electoral vote not close at all. So he definitely needed to rethink his strategy according to the electoral college system. The states with more votes get a lot of attention, obviously the big states, but then also the swing states. There are a handful of swing states that you don't know which way they're going to go. You need to campaign there more than anywhere else. Ohio and Florida today and Pennsylvania are typically regarded as swing states. You might even want a vice president from a swing state. Might be very helpful if they can deliver that to you. The candidate needs to campaign on a platform that resonates with the people, something that the people are concerned about. They need to make sure that their strategy is not this expert political strategy, but is something that the common person is interested in and cares about. You need to know what the public wants and doesn't want. For instance, when Walter Mondale said, "I'm going to raise taxes," people didn't like that. That might be the responsible thing to do to get out of debt, but that was not the popular thing to do. They said, "We're in debt, I'm going to raise taxes." And he did not become president. He said, "Let's tell the truth. Mr. Reagan will raise taxes, and so will I. He won't tell you, I just did." Now, Ronald Reagan cut taxes a lot. And then he raised taxes a lot. And by the end of his time in office, the taxes were higher than when he began, even with all his tax cuts. I guess that's just the way of the world. When people were asking different Democratic candidates what they thought the most important issue of the day was, of the election, he said very famously, "It's the economy, stupid. You got to make people rich and then they'll vote for you." And that worked. That was a very effective campaign strategy. Promised to make people rich. That's really what people wanted. And he was able to deliver on that as well. His time was a prosperous time for America. Not only do you have to boost yourself up and tell everyone what they want to hear, you also have to attack your opponent, which leads to some amazing attack ads. And I have here for you some of the most famous attack ads, and some of them are just, they're hilarious. Let's take a watch.
Eisenhower answers America.
The Democrats have made mistakes, but aren't their intentions good?
Well, if the driver of your school bus runs into a truck, hits a lamppost, drives into a ditch, you don't say, his intentions are good, you get a new bus driver.
Step right up, folks. See the mental marvel of the campaign, Mr. McGOP. He promises to solve all your problems. Ask him any question.
What about Korea?
We don't belong in Korea. Let the commies have it. We should expand the war. Open a second front in China.
Wait a minute. We can't do both. We can't pull our troops out of Korea and invade China.
Go away, lady. You bother me. Any more questions?
At the same press conference, President Eisenhower said,
No one can make a decision except me.
and as for any major ideas from Mr. Nixon,
If you give me a week, I might think of one. I don't remember.
President Eisenhower could not remember, but the voters will remember. For real leadership in the 60s, help elect Senator John F. Kennedy president.
8, 9,
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
These are the stakes. To make a world in which all of God's children can live.
Vote for President Johnson on November 3rd. The stakes are too high for you to stay home.
How can a party that can't unite itself unite the nation? How can a party that can't keep order in its own backyard hope to keep order in our 50 states?
This is about secrecy. This is about stealing. This is about hidden funds. This is about deception. This is about the White House. And this is how you stop it. With your vote.
I just can't imagine him being president. It's too complex a job.
When I go into the polling booth on November 4th, I'm not just going to think of the politics. I got to think of my family.
Two men are the real contenders for the presidency today. The people of California remember one of them quite well.
Ronald Reagan is not a man that I would want leading our country for any period of time.
I deeply, deeply resent and am offended by the attacks that President Carter has made on my husband, the personal attacks that he's made on my husband. He is not a warmonger. He is not a man who is going to throw the elderly out on the street and cut out their Social Security. That's a terrible thing to do and to say about anybody. That's campaigning on fear.
Now Ronald Reagan says the economy is moving up. It is, up on a mountain of debt and record Reagan deficits, more borrowing than all the other presidents in history combined. That'll drive interest rates up, slow the economy down, and then, if you're thinking of voting for Ronald Reagan in 1984, think of what'll happen in 1985.
Add 26 cents to a loaf of bread if Carter Mondale's inflation continued. Add 34 cents to milk. $1.28 to a pound of bacon. If that doesn't convince you to vote for President Reagan, stop off at the gas station and imagine paying $2.27 a gallon.
Dukakis opposed the stealth bomber and a ground emergency warning system against nuclear attack. He even criticized our rescue mission to Grenada and our strike on Libya. And now he wants to be our commander-in-chief. America can't afford that risk.
Hey, pal, how about a couple $100 billion? I'll pay you right back.
This is what the Republicans call managing the economy.
Hey, pal, $500 billion, just to kind of get me over the hump.
They should call it mortgaging our children's future.
He says he wouldn't rule out term limits, while he says he's personally opposed to term limits. This candidate was called up for military service, while this one claims he wasn't. One of these candidates is Bill Clinton. Unfortunately, so is the other.
The George Bush promise.
Read my lips. No new.
Then he gave us the second biggest tax increase in American history. Bush increased the gas tax by 56%. Can we afford 4 more years? Bill Clinton, a different kind of Democrat.
Bill Clinton never took the drug crisis seriously.
If you had it to do over again, would you inhale?
Sure, if I could. I tried before.
You know the result. Under Clinton's liberal policies, teen drug use has doubled. But now Clinton admits he was wrong.
I wish I'd never done any of that, although I did such a little bit, but it was wrong.
Kerry voted for the Iraq War, opposed it, supported it, and now opposes it again. He bragged about voting for the $87 billion to support our troops before he voted against it. He voted for education reform and now opposes it. He claims he's against increasing Medicare premiums, but voted 5 times to do so. John Kerry, whichever way the wind blows.
1,000 U.S. casualties. 2 Americans beheaded just this week. The Pentagon admits terrorists are pouring into Iraq. In the face of the Iraq quagmire, George Bush's answer is to run a juvenile and tasteless attack ad. John Kerry has a plan for success.
He's the biggest celebrity in the world. But is he ready to lead? With gas prices soaring, Barack Obama says no to offshore drilling and says he'll raise taxes on electricity.
Wonder where John McCain would take the economy? Look behind you. John McCain wants to continue George Bush's economic policies. As president, he'd provide no tax breaks to 101 million Americans, but keep tax breaks for companies that ship our jobs overseas.
But on July 12th, President Obama quietly announced a plan to gut welfare reform by dropping work requirements. Under Obama's plan, you wouldn't have to work and wouldn't have to train for a job. They just send you your welfare check. And welfare to work goes back to being plain old welfare. Mitt Romney will restore the work requirement because it works.
You work hard, stretch every penny, but chances are you pay a higher tax rate than him. Mitt Romney made $20 million in 2010, but paid only 14% in taxes, probably less than you. Now he has a plan that would give millionaires another tax break.
Hope you enjoyed that. Some of those were quite entertaining. Voting is one of our biggest rights, and it's the right that protects all the other rights. It's the only way really that you have an actual say in government. You know, you could protest, you can wave a sign, you can write a letter, but the biggest impact you have on government is obviously by voting. But it is not just a privilege, it is a responsibility and a duty that we need to do that. America has one of the freest voting systems in the world. It's very easy to become an American citizen, and there are no restrictions, almost none, to vote in America other than being a citizen and being an adult. But 60% voter turnout is pretty common for presidential elections, and sometimes it's down to like 40% for other elections, and that's really sad. When Afghanistan had its first democratic vote in history, in the early 2000s, they had like a 98% voter turnout. And we get sometimes a 40% voter turnout. That's just sad. Hey, in Wiscasset, there's so few voters here. When I went to vote, I had like a 2-minute wait. There was the shortest line ever. It took me longer to drive to the community center than to wait in line. And it's so easy to vote in America. Go ahead and vote. Each one of you will be able to vote for the next president. And I hope wherever you are, you do vote for the next president. It's very important. A lot of people say, what if neither person has the exact same politics as me? But then take that a step further. What if both politicians have some major moral flaws, or even just major political flaws? How can I vote for this person when I know they've done some pretty bad things? And, you know, if you look at attack ads from recent years, you can see some attack ads against all the modern politicians, and many of them are absolutely truthful. We have many people in office and who have been in office who have major moral failures, who are big sinners. How can I vote for one of them? And that is a very difficult question. I don't really have an answer for you. I think the easiest and quickest answer is choose the lesser of the two evils. There are two people running, and maybe one of them is better than the other, even if they're not perfect. The other issue you got to consider is you're not choosing a pastor, you're not choosing a religious leader. I'm not saying it's not a problem if they sin, because obviously it is a problem if they have major sin problems, but you are choosing them based on their politics. You're not voting for a best friend. You're not voting for a pastor, you're voting for a politician. So if they both have major moral failures, okay, then look at the politics. Which one of them do you think will have the better tax policy? I know that's not great, but you are not their religious overseer. I do think, however, that we should never be so excited about a candidate's politics that we excuse their sin. And I see that happen way too often, where people are like, this person wants to lower taxes, they want to increase jobs in Maine, so it's okay if they do X, Y, and Z. Like, no, it's hard, but we do need to support the good and condemn the bad. And yes, it is possible to do both at the same time. To say, yes, I like when this person did this. No, I hate when that person did that. You will see in the Bible how you have prophets, men of God, who preach against the sin of their leaders. You have Nathan going to David and saying, thou art the man. You committed adultery and that was wrong. You have John the Baptist preaching that King Herod was committing adultery and he was wrong. He was in sin. And the church today needs to preach, this candidate committed adultery, that's wrong. I don't know, it's a very complicated topic, and I don't have all the answers, but definitely something to consider. Exit polls. The newspapers and news media online, they want to know who's winning. And the states don't release the official votes usually until the next day. They wait till all the votes are counted sometimes before they release them. Sometimes they do release the votes county by county, and there are a few states that update you like every hour, which is, I guess, nice. But usually right outside the voting station, there will be a reporter. It's like, hey, who did you vote for? And you could tell them who you voted for if you want. These are not official. They're not run by the government. They are just run by CBS or whoever. They're not mandatory. They can't make you talk. Voting in America is a secret. You do not have to tell anyone if you don't want to. But you can if you want, and then the newspapers will be able to tell everyone, live election coverage, who they think is going to win. With easy access to news updated every 5 minutes sometimes, there's a question, out in California, they're 4 hours behind us. So if they hear what way the election's going on the East Coast states, is that going to affect West Coast voters? If so, is it going to make them vote more or less? If you know your guy is winning, are you going to vote for your guy and make sure he wins? Or are you going to say, he's winning, why bother vote? If your guy's losing, are you going to go vote for your guy to make sure he wins? Or are you going to say, well, my guy's losing, so it's a lost cause? I don't know. Is it okay? Is it moral that we tell California which way Maine is voting 4 hours ahead of time? That's the nature of the 24 hours news cycle. That's just how the internet works. Are they affected by knowing which way we're voting 4 hours before they have to vote? Probably they are affected. How much? I really don't know. And then, of course, Hawaii, they vote hours and hours and hours behind we do. So they know which way the election is heading before they ever go to the polls. Unfortunately, not very many Americans vote. As I said before, sometimes less than half. And this guy, George Nathan, he wrote, bad officials are elected by good citizens who don't vote. And when you're worried about who to vote for, or you're not terribly excited about either candidate, and you're just not sure if it's worth it, go ahead and vote. Because if you don't choose the president, someone else will choose the president. And if you're not sure who to vote for, maybe they are sure, and they're going to vote for a bad person, a worse person. So make sure that you pray about it and think about it. If it's election day and you still don't know, that is a problem. You probably have months of time to do your research and figure out who you think is going to be the best person for the job. And go ahead and do that and make sure you vote every single time. It usually only takes the night to determine which way the state votes. Usually something like 90% of the votes are counted by early the next morning, and by the next day, all those votes haven't been counted. But sometimes there are complications, and it takes weeks because they're recounting and recounting and recounting, counting by hand and all that. Sometimes there are questions that go to court. At this last election, there were many, many lawsuits. Most of them, almost all of them, were dropped immediately due to lack of evidence, but sometimes there is serious lawsuits, serious shenanigans going on that need to be addressed. And your book mentions President Taft. Was it Taft? No, we already talked about Taft. President Hayes. Oh, on page 238, it talks about the disputed election of 2000, Bush versus Gore. That was crazy. Sorry, I'll find that at a different time. Right after the Civil War, there was a pretty crazy election. We'll talk about that maybe when I get there in person. Still, the election does not take place on election day. You do not vote for a president on election day. You actually vote for someone who's going to vote for the president, which is a little confusing because when you check off the box that you vote for Joe Schmo, you're not actually voting for Joe Schmo. You might be voting for Billy, and Billy's going to go to D.C. and vote for Joe Schmo. The actual presidential election happens months later, a couple months later. And here are 3 electors, and they're electors from the state of Arizona, and those are the real ballots that they get to vote for. So they all travel in person to D.C., and they read their votes aloud in the Senate and count out all those, 538 votes, 538 electors, and they're the ones who choose the president. This is just a formality, really. Back in the day, however, you don't have media coverage, so you don't know who won the election. So it is often a surprise until those people actually show up in town. You don't have newspapers that can spread the news that fast. You don't have telegrams. You have to wait there. This, by the way, is what January 6th was all about. They wanted to end these insurrectionists, these rioters, wanted to end the election because Biden won, and they did not want the electors to vote for Biden. They thought since Vice President Pence was the president of the Senate, that as president of the Senate, he could just tell the Senate not to count the votes. Or he could tell the president to throw out some states' votes and accept other states. Mike Pence said, no, I'm not allowed to change or throw out a state's vote. That's not the vice president's job. There's nothing in the Constitution that says the vice president can say, no, I don't want to accept Arizona's votes or whoever. You can't do that. That's not how it works. So, of course, you have people shouting, hang Mike Pence, because they wanted him to change the election in their favor. And that did not go over well, and 5 people died. Historically, only representatives were directly voted by the people. When you go to vote, you vote for the president, you vote for representatives, but you're really voting for electors for the president. You're only voting for representatives directly, and you don't get to vote for senators at all. Senators were chosen by your state legislators, and the president by the Electoral College. The Electoral College is really weird, and every election there's lots of people who say, let's get rid of it. We are the only country in the world that has anything remotely like the Electoral College. 5 times we've had presidents lose the popular vote but win the election, and that's a weird situation to be in, where more people voted for the other guy but you got in anyway. Not terribly fair. So what is the stinking point of this silly system? Well, the point is to give the smaller states a little bit more power. Not a lot more power, but a little bit more power. We are a nation of states, not just a nation of individuals. This is one of the last vestiges of federalism that is still alive. The states have a little bit of power. It is designed so that the minority cannot get steamrolled by the majority. For instance, Maine has 0.4% of America's population, a little less than half of America's population. But Maine gets 0.7% of the Electoral College. We get 50% more say in presidential elections than other states do. We get 50% more say than if we were just voting by population. That is an awful lot percentage-wise. It's almost nothing actually numbers-wise. We only send 4 electors out of the 580. What was it, 587, 588? I don't even know. I'm so tired, guys. I'm sorry. Over 500 electors. We only send 4, but that's still 50% more than we would send, which would be, 0.4% of the population. So there you go. The method of choosing electors varies. Typically, it is the party leadership chooses who's going to be the elector for the Republican Party and for the Democratic Party. That usually happens at state conventions. Sometimes, like if the Republican governor will choose Republican electors, and the leader of the Democrats will choose the Democrat electors. The electors are the ones who physically bring your votes to DC and vote. Many states require them to vote for the person that the people voted for, but it is not unconstitutional for the elector to vote for someone else, which means if the whole state voted for Joe Schmo, then the elector could say, well, actually, I choose to vote for Billy. I'm like, wait, what? That's called being a faithless elector. That's another thing that a lot of people are like, why is this legal? I don't know. It's only happened a handful, like 2 times in America, 2 or 3 times. And I don't think it's actually swung any election, but it is quite possible that even if the people vote one way, the elector votes another way, which is why you got to pick someone that is diehard for your side. Most states are winner take all. Nebraska and Maine do percentages. So we don't necessarily have to send all our votes for one person or another. There are 538, that's what it was, I'm sorry, 538 total votes. You need 270 to win. Every 10 years, they adjust how many votes each state gets at the census. The last census, Maine has not changed. We still get 4 votes. Electors meet in their states to cast the ballots on the Monday after the second Wednesday in December, which is even more complicated than calculating voting day, which once again, why don't you just say December 10th or something? I don't know. That's weird. They go to the Senate, counts them after the new Congress convenes. So after the new senators come in, that's when the new senators listen to the Electoral College. The president of the new Senate is the old vice president for just a few weeks. It's really weird, but there you go. So Mike Pence was the last vice president, and yet he was the president of the Senate for the new senators for a few weeks. Only job in the world where you can get fired and you still hang around for a month. That's weird. Bush Sr. was a vice president when he ran for president, and he got to be presiding in the Senate and say, congratulations to me, I just became president, which is pretty cool. Al Gore was a vice president who ran for president, and he lost in 2000, so he got to announce the other guy beat me. George W. Bush beat me. So that's kind of heartbreaking. Not that I'm too sad for Mr. Inconvenient Truth. If no candidate wins a majority, the House of Representatives take the top 3 and they get to pick who they want. Each state gets 1 vote, which again, that's a very complicated system of doing things, but there you go. This has happened only twice in our history. Each state's vote is allotted to the candidate preferred by the majority of the state's representatives. So we have we have 2 senators, we have 2 representatives. So they would have to agree on who to pick for the next president.